I hope you enjoy this hero's journey into the realm of philosophy, psychology, and physics. If you want to help me create more content like this, please subscribe and consider sponsoring me here on YouTube. I also want to thank the Platonic Mystery School of the Divine Infinite Being for sponsoring this course, and you can check that school out at divineinfinitebeing.com. Welcome to Immortality and the Unreality of Death, a hero's journey through philosophy, psychology, and physics. My name is Timothy Owen Desmond. I more often go by my initials TOD, Todd, and to give you a background about myself and why you should trust me to take you on this hero's journey through philosophy, psychology, and physics, I'll tell you about my academic background. I got a bachelor's degree with a major in philosophy and political science from Boston College in 1993, then a Master of Liberal Studies from Georgetown University, a Master's of Political Science from the University of Hawaii in Manoa, with a concentration in Political Futures Studies, and then a PhD in Philosophy and Religion with a concentration in Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness from the California Institute of Integral Studies in 2014. That's when I was awarded the PhD. I'll discuss my dissertation in a moment, but first let me mention that in 2013, I started teaching classes in philosophy, religion, and ethics at the College of Southern Maryland, where I've been teaching for the past 10 years. Going back to 2014, the title of my dissertation is Psyche equals Singularity, a comparison of Carl Jung's transpersonal psychology and Leonard Susskind's holographic string theory, which I then turned into a book, Psyche and Singularity, Jungian Psychology and Holographic String Theory. So this class, Immortality and the Unreality of Death, is based in large part on that book. Here's my book, Psyche and Singularity, Jungian Psychology, and Holographic String Theory. Psyche and Singularity reveals the truth about immortality and the unreality of death. In my book, Psyche and Singularity, Jungian Psychology, and Holographic String Theory, I chart a path through the academic wilderness of philosophy, psychology, and physics, a detailed map for the hero's journey towards self-knowledge. In this class, we will walk to the world of the dead and back, equipped with a gift to save the world. So as we will discover as we wander through class, one of the drivers of human behavior is the fear of death and the desire to overcome death by becoming a cosmic hero in the eyes of an all-knowing God. After you have taken this class, you will have all of the confidence you need to take a leap of faith off of the cliff of scientific skepticism into the welcoming embrace of an omnipresent God. Without making this leap, you cannot unleash the innate hero in us all, the eternal soul locked up in the prison of material illusion. By taking this class, you will see the striking parallels between the laws of physics and the laws of psychology, which will help you understand both fields more deeply and convince you that you are an eternal part and parcel of God, playing out your life on the world stage of God's holographic dream. By the end of this class, you will realize that you are living in a culminating point of world history. You will see that we have come full circle back to Plato's original academy, centered on his theory of the infinitely bright source of all being, the idea of the good. This class completes the blueprint Plato laid out for the education of the enlightened leaders of society. It will open the eye of your soul to the spiritual sunshine radiating from God. Wander with me now through the beautiful landscape of ideas from the east and west as we spiral toward that central most idea, grasping which will empower you to play your heroic role in the theater of God's holographic mind. The hero's journey. Everyone's destiny. From Plato to Joseph Campbell, much ink has been spilt about the hero's journey. Mythological narratives from across the globe retell a similar story of the hero's adventure of self-discovery, which includes a harrowing encounter with death and a return to the land of the living with the power to bestow boons. In this class, I clearly explain the overwhelming evidence that demonstrates that you are an eternal soul springing from a universal soul, to love and serve whom is the ultimate purpose of life. A careful study of these slides will give you the confidence to embark on the hero's journey. Indeed, this class is itself a hero's journey, perfectly tailored for our 21st century situation. So we will be looking at philosophers, starting with Plato and moving through Aristotle and the philosophers of the Middle Ages, such as St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, through the modern era, René Descartes, David Hume, Immanuel Kant, a whole list of philosophers, and we will also be going over the history of physics. And comparing these two, we will see that the evidence has been accumulating over the past several millennia that points to the equation Psyche equals Singularity, which is what I focused on in my PhD program at the California Institute of Integral Studies. So here's Joseph Campbell, the hero path. We have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero path. And where we had thought to find an abomination, we shall find a god. And where we had thought to slay another, we shall slay ourselves. Where we had thought to travel outwards, we shall come to the center of our own existence. And where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world. This is a quote from Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which we'll be quoting from extensively later in the class. And this quote is particularly pertinent to this class because it has to do with the myth of Ariadne giving Theseus the thread with which he entered into the labyrinth, slayed the Minotaur, and then exited the labyrinth, which is archetypically very similar to string theory, as we will discuss. True heroism consists in being superior to the ills of life, in whatever shape they may challenge us to combat. Napoleon Bonaparte. So here's a quote from Hegel. The great men in history are those whose own particular aims contain the substantial will, that is, the will of the world spirit. They can be called heroes because they have drawn their aim and their vocation not merely from the calm and orderly system that is the sanctified course of things, but rather from a source whose content is hidden and has not yet matured into present existence. This source is the inner spirit that is as yet hidden beneath the surface. It knocks at the outer world as though that were a shell. The advanced spirit is this inner soul of all individuals, but this is an unconscious inwardness which the great men bring to consciousness. Like Joseph Campbell, we will also be quoting extensively from Hegel later in this class, and we'll understand that his idea of history is the process of God's own self-realization through human beings and their organization into nation states. The Denial of Death. In his Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Denial of Death, Ernest Becker explains that on the one hand, humans have self-awareness, which enables us to, quote, expand into dimensions of worlds and times without moving a limb. It can take eternity into itself even as it graspingly dies. On the other hand, returning to Becker's book, the idea of death, the fear of it, haunts the human animal like nothing else. It is a mainspring of human activity designed largely to avoid the fatality of death, to overcome it by denying in some way that it is the final destiny of man. I read this book first back in 2006 while I was taking classes at Georgetown University, and I thought it was a profound book. As you can see here, it's according to this quote from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, author of On Death and Dying. She says, "It puts together what others have torn to pieces and rendered useless. It is one of those rare masterpieces that will stimulate your thoughts, your intellectual curiosity, and last but not least, your soul." So Becker's theory is, as these quotes demonstrate, that the mainspring of human action is the fear of death and the attempt to overcome that fear by perceiving ourselves as immortal heroes playing on the cosmic stage before an all-knowing, all-powerful God. In this class, I'll demonstrate how, My book, Psyche and Singularity, and specifically the equation Psyche equals Singularity, helps us perceive a worldview through which that ultimate goal of human life seems reasonable, seems inevitable. Psyche and Singularity resolves the denial of death. According to Becker, the same science of clinical psychology that replaced religion came full circle to the religious realization that, whether true or not, humans desperately need to believe that we are immortal cosmic heroes who serve an infinite God. Unfortunately, it is one thing to imagine this cure, but it is quite another thing to prescribe it to modern man. How hollow it must ring in his ears. In this class, I will show how my book, Psyche and Singularity, Jungian Psychology, and Holographic String Theory provides the impossible cure that Becker prescribes. In 2010, I took a class on the psychologist Carl Jung at the California Institute of Integral Studies. We read Jung's autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, in which he recalls his near-death experience in 1944. On July 4, 2010, I watched an episode of Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman entitled The Black Hole War. I noticed an incredible parallel which became the foundation of my dissertation. So it was in Marin County, California. I was with my friend, and my friends were out in the town enjoying the 4th of July festivities, and I was staying inside for a while longer to work on some of my papers for the PhD program. And in the background on the TV, the television series Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman was playing. And this episode was the Black Hole War, and it was Leonard Susskind, a Stanford string theorist, Leonard Susskind, versus Stephen Hawking, who has subsequently died, but he was still alive in 2010. And Stephen Hawking claimed that when information, so the fundamental unit of matter according to their cosmology, Susskind and Hawking and academic physicists, is called a bit of information. And even more fundamental than the principle of the conservation of mass and energy, according to the principle of information conservation, if you had a bomb and it exploded, not only would all the energy and matter still have to be contained in the universe, but the information that describes the trajectory of every atom of gas and fragment of that bomb must be capable of being at least theoretically retraced so that you could reassemble the bomb. All of the information describing that original bomb should still be in the universe, but Stephen Hawking was saying that information is erased by a black hole. Once it goes past to the event horizon, it is erased from the observable universe. Leonard Susskind, when he heard that, he realized that that violates the most fundamental principle of information conservation, and he dedicated himself to demonstrating how that must be impossible. The Black Hole War, Hawking versus Susskind. Stephen Hawking said black holes swallow information. Susskind realized that would violate the most fundamental physical principle of all, information conservation. Susskind realized that if that principle falls, all of physics falls with it. So that's recapping what I said before, and it's worth repeating because this is the foundation of the Black Hole War, which led to Leonard Susskind's solution and victory in that war, which is holographic string theory. So let's just for a moment look here at the cover of Leonard Suskind's book, The Black Hole War, My Battle with Stephen Hawking to Make the World Safe for Quantum Mechanics. That subtitle is a reference to the fact that the principle of information conservation is especially important for quantum mechanics, the fundamentals of which we will be discussing in subsequent slides. Suskind's holographic string theory. According to Leonard Susskind, each cubic volume of our three-dimensional universe is like a holographic movie projected by one-dimensional strings that stretch all the way out to the two-dimensional horizon of the cosmos, upon which the past, present, and future are interwoven at each point. So we're going to go over Suskind's holographic string theory several times. It's the foundation of this class. So for the first go-over, let me just say that according to Leonard Susskind, the universe is an inside-out black hole, expanding from a central singularity, a gravitational point of infinite density, instead of collapsing into one, as happens inside a black hole. So what he said to Stephen Hawking was that, yes, you are correct, from the perspective of someone following a bit of information past the event horizon of a black hole, it is erased from the universe. However, if you were observing that same bit of information from outside the black hole, you would see that everything is made of fundamental strings that are too small to be empirically observed with technology available today, the Planck length. But you would see those strings slow down and smear out around the event horizon of the black hole. They would never go past the event horizon, and then they would be released from the event horizon with the outgoing Hawking radiation, which we will discuss in subsequent videos. But that's how he saved the bits of information from being swallowed. They are from one perspective, from another they're released. And since the universe is an inside-out black hole, the same principle applies. The holographic principle is what he called this information conservation at the event horizon of a black hole. Similarly, bits of information are conserved at the outermost sphere of the universe, where from our geocentric perspective on Earth, it seems it's the spherical border where space-time appears to be expanding away from us at the speed of light. Each bit of information describing the past, the present, and the future is interwoven at each point of this encompassing sphere, and then it radiates back in with the cosmic microwave background radiation on these fundamental elastic threads of energy to create this three-dimensional illusion that Susskind calls a cinematic hologram. That our three-dimensional world, evolving over time, is in fact, according to Susskind, a holographic movie projected by threads of energy from the two-dimensional holographic film at the spherical horizon of the cosmos. That's the fundamental knowledge upon which this class is based, and it makes the idea of serving God on a cosmic proportion as a hero more plausible. Jung's NDE and Suskind's holographic string theory. So NDE stands for near-death experience. While I was watching that episode of Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman, it reminded me of Carl Jung's near-death experience, which I had just read that same summer at the California Institute of Integral Studies when I was reading Memories, Dreams, Reflections, which is Carl Jung's autobiography. So here's a quote from that autobiography from Carl Jung describing his near-death experience. He says, "It seemed to me as if behind the horizon of the cosmos, a three-dimensional world had been artificially built up, in which each person sat by himself in a little box. I had been so glad to shed it all, and now it had come about that I, along with everyone else, would again be hung up in a box by a thread." Continuing with Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he says, "We shy away from the word eternal, but I can describe the experience only as the ecstasy of a non-temporal state in which the present, past, and future are one. One is interwoven into an indescribable whole, and yet observes it with complete objectivity." So that's Carl Jung, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. So you see the parallel here with Suskind's holographic string theory. Susskind says that each bit of information describing the past, the present, and the future is interwoven at each point of the encompassing horizon of the cosmos, and it radiates in on threads of energy to create the cubic illusion of our life inside the universe. And that's exactly what Carl Jung said he experienced. And this is 30 years before Leonard Susskind and his Nobel Prize-winning partner Gerard 't Hooft came up with their holographic string theory, which was the early 1990s. It was complete, I believe, by 1993. Carl Jung's Memories, Dreams, Reflections was published in 1961. So that's over 30 years before Susskind and 't Hooft developed their holographic string theory. So we know Jung was not imitating string theory, and we can safely assume that Susskind and 't Hooft were not imitating Jung, because Susskind, at any rate, has a worldview that's exactly the opposite of Carl Jung's worldview of an ensouled cosmos. So these parallels between Carl Jung's near-death experience and Suskind's holographic string theory indicate that both of them are true. When I first read Carl Jung's near-death experience, it didn't strike me as all that important. It didn't stick out to me. But when I heard Susskind describing his holographic string theory and recalled Jung's near-death experience, and I saw how closely the two paralleled each other, then suddenly both of them became extremely important to me, and it became the foundation for my academic career ever since, and this was in the summer of 2010. Psyche equals singularity, Jungs Key Equation. So here's a quote from Carl Jung on a letter that he wrote on February 29th, 1952, which I call the Leap Day letter, because February 29th is Leap Day, happens once every 4 years. So he wrote a letter about the relationship between psychic energy and mass, and he was thinking in terms of Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. And we will discuss all of these things in subsequent videos, and we'll go over this Leap Day letter in more detail. But here in the introduction, I want to just get down to the most essential ingredients, and Jung concludes that letter with his speculation about psychic energy and mass. Psyche equals highest intensity in the smallest space, which I translate into psyche equals singularity, because a gravitational singularity is the highest intensity of mass or energy in the smallest space. It's infinite intensity and zero volume, as I'll explain in the next slide. Psyche equals singularity. Psyche equals highest intensity in the smallest space. So just going over this key equation. The highest intensity of energy is infinite density. The smallest space is a point of zero volume, a mathematical point. According to general relativity, that is a gravitational singularity. Therefore, Jung's equation can be simplified into Psyche equals singularity. This is the key equation, the linchpin that unites physics and psychology. And that union of physics and psychology provides a worldview within which the idea of cosmic heroics for an omnipotent God makes sense. Psyche equals singularity, the simple equation that says it all. So here's a quote attributed to Einstein. I couldn't find it a lot on the internet. A lot of people attribute this to Einstein. Everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. Now here's a quote from Ernest Becker, author of The Denial of Death. Some kind of simple-minded general statement is in order, one that is not itself polemical, but tries to combine all the major viewpoints into one clear perspective. So that simple-minded general statement I'm saying is Psyche equals singularity. To gain an understanding of the implications of that equation opens up an entirely new worldview within which we can reinterpret the entire history of philosophy, stemming back to Plato in the West and the Vedanta philosophy in the East. Jung and Wolfgang Pauli. Psychology and physics mirror each other. So Jung worked with Wolfgang Pauli to detect parallels between psychology and physics from 1932 until Pauli died in 1958. Pauli, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics, helped establish the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics in 1927. He discovered the Pauli exclusion principle, which determines the positions of electrons in an atom, which is the foundation of chemistry. He predicted neutrinos, which carry rare elements out of exploding stars or supernovas. The one physicist most responsible for discovering what chemicals are, how they interact, and how they are distributed throughout the universe, and he explicitly rejected materialistic reductionism. Materialistic reductionism is the philosophy that everything can be reduced to little bits of matter. That assumption, which is pervasive in academia, and therefore also most of the Western world at least, does not make sense in light of the evolution of physics since Isaac Newton, as we will discuss in subsequent videos. In 1905, Einstein discovered special relativity, which taught us that the past, the present, and the future coexist, that the flow of time from the past to the future is an illusion, however persistent. That's a quote that Einstein said. In 1915, he discovered general relativity, his theory of gravity, from which the Big Bang theory arose, and the theory of black holes and gravitational singularities. And then in 1927, Wolfgang Pauli helped co-discover the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which says when you observe a fundamental particle, it acts like a particle, but when you're not observing it, it behaves like an immaterial mathematical wave of probability for where a particle might appear were you to observe it. It was very strange, but the point is that those three theories alone render the idea of little bits of matter that exist in three dimensions of space, whether you're observing them or not, obsolete, as I said before. And then holographic string theory unites quantum mechanics and general relativity, which have been at odds each other until that union in string theory. And that theory says that the past, the present, and the future not only coexist, but they coexist specifically out at the horizon of the cosmos and radiate in on threads of energy with the echo of the Big Bang, the cosmic microwave background radiation. That current academic worldview returns us to the worldview established by Plato in his various dialogues, as we'll see. So the point is, materialistic reductionism, which was based on Isaac Newton's physics, which he established in 1687, no longer makes sense in light of the advancement of physics in the 20th century, culminating with holographic string theory. Jung and Pauli. According to Pauli, the ordering and regulating factors must be placed beyond the distinction of physical and psychic, as Plato's ideas share the notion of a concept and of a force of nature. They create actions out of themselves. I am very much in favor of referring to the ordering and regulating factors in terms of archetypes, but then it would be impermissible to define them as contents of the psyche. The mentioned inner images, dominant features of the collective unconscious after Jung, are rather psychic manifestations of the archetypes, which, however, would also have to put forth, create, condition anything law-like in the behavior of the corporeal world. The laws of this world would then be the physical manifestations of the archetypes. Journal of Consciousness Studies from the year 2006. So if you see the picture here, it's the Capitol building of the United States of America reflected in a reflecting pool, which is the idea that the laws of physics and psychology mirror each other. The Capitol building is where Congress makes the laws. So the laws of mind and matter mirror each other, according to Wolfgang Pauli, master physicist, and according to Carl Jung, a master psychologist. Carl Jung was the protege of Sigmund Freud, the first really world-famous psychologist. There were others before him, such as William James, but Carl Jung came up with the idea of a collective unconscious. Freud said, yes, we have an unconscious mind, a subconscious mind where we repress all of our unseemly desires and impulses. And Jung agreed with that, but he said deeper than the personal unconscious is a collective unconscious, which is filled with archetypes, which are these forms of understanding. As we'll see, Pauli and Jung both equated Jung's theory of archetypes with Plato's theory of ideas, as Pauli mentions in this quote. Plato's ideas, or the Jungian archetypes, are these fundamental forms of knowledge from which radiate the three-dimensional world and all of the temporary forms that we see. The archetypes are the eternal forms, and the temporary material forms are like a shadow projection. We'll be going over all of those details, but the fundamental point of this slide is that the laws of physics and psychology mirror each other. And we saw that play out very clearly in the parallels between Carl Jung's near-death experience and Leonard Susskind's holographic string theory of information conservation at the horizon of the cosmos. Jung's Mandala theory, the image of God. Mandala, a circle or sphere with a central point, is the psychic image of the ultimate archetype of unity through the union of opposites. The self archetype, the one, unus mundus, or God. Carl Jung said that all of the archetypes radiate from one supreme archetype, which he called the self, or the one, unus mundus, which means one world in Latin, and God. Carl Jung said mandalas emerge in dreams and fantasies to compensate a conscious ego pulled between opposing demands. And here's a quote from Memories, Dreams, Reflections. I knew that in finding the mandala as an expression of the self, I had attained what was for me the ultimate. Perhaps someone else knows more, but not I. So that's quite an extraordinary claim from an extraordinary thinker. According to Carl Jung, his ultimate realization was that the mandala, a circle or a sphere with a central point, is the image that arises spontaneously from the collective unconscious mind to compensate an ego that is torn between irreconcilable and opposing demands. We'll see that that came true in the mind of Leonard Susskind, who was pulled between the opposing demands of Stephen Hawking's realization that the laws of general relativity, which culminate with the discovery of black holes in the Big Bang Theory, says that information is lost inside a black hole. And yet the laws of physics themselves demand that the principle of information conservation holds true. So pulled between these two demands, and also between the two demands of quantum mechanics which is especially dependent on the principle of information conservation and general relativity. These are opposing theories of physics. This is a theme we'll be returning to throughout the series. That general relativity and quantum mechanics, the opposite theories of matter, one of the big and the heavy, general relativity, the other of the very tiny, quantum mechanics. They are mathematically irreconcilable, or at least they were, until Susskind and 't Hooft reconciled them in holographic string theory. This tension between these opposing demands of these two opposing languages of physics was driving Leonard Susskind mad in his own admission, and then to compensate that state of his conflicted ego, the self-archetype allowed him to find the resolution of opposites in nature's perfect mandala, which is a black hole. It's a perfect two-dimensional sphere encompassing a perfect mathematical point. A black hole is not a physical thing, it's a mathematical object. It stands outside of space and time because space and time end at the speed of light, which defines the spherical perimeter of a black hole, and then the inward contraction of space-time becomes infinite in the central singularity. But the point to focus on in this slide is that Jung said the mandala is the naturally arising image of the God archetype. If the laws of physics and psychology mirror each other, and in the psyche, the ego torn between opposing demands is compensated by a psychic image of a mandala during dreams or fantasies or moments of scientific inspiration, well then, what form does the mandala take in the physical world? Assuming again that psychology and physics mirror each other because mind and matter both arise from the same supreme source, the God archetype. And I'm saying the image of God, or the mandala image in the material world, is a black hole. Nature's perfect mandala. And the universe itself, according to Susskind, is an inside-out black hole. It, too, is a perfect mandala. It is the one. Keep in mind also the equation Psyche equals Singularity. The singularity is the psyche. The source of all psyches is the supreme psyche, the self-archetype. And its image is the mandala, which Jung said is his ultimate discovery. And I'm saying that it makes sense that that would be his ultimate discovery, considering how psychology and physics find their unity in the mandala of the universe itself, the inside-out black hole. So this slide is an introduction to a video I made. I made a series of videos about my book, Psyche and Singularity, and the introductory video is available here. I just think it'll reiterate the fundamental principles upon which this class is based. It'll be worth your while to observe it. So let me just read the slide. Psyche and Singularity Overview Video. I created this video as an overview of my book, Psyche and Singularity, Jungian Psychology and Holographic String Theory. We added helpful imagery. It will recap what we have established so far and reinforce the basic principles upon which this class is based. I explain how Susskind's theory supports four crucial aspects of Jung's psychology: his near-death experience of the cosmic horizon, his equation, Psyche equals highest intensity in the smallest space, his compensatory mandala theory, and his theory of meaningful coincidences or synchronicity. I hope you are enjoying this hero's journey into the realm of philosophy, psychology, and physics. If you want to help me create more content like this, please subscribe and consider sponsoring me here on YouTube. You can also click the link to my website, psycheandsingularity.com, to sign up for a multiple-choice test with over 100 well-crafted questions related to this class, and links to the specific parts of each video where the answers can be found. If you take that test to the end, you will receive a certificate indicating that you have become a Psyche and Singularity scholar. In addition to access to that test, there is also the opportunity to answer essay questions that ask you to relate concepts covered in this class to your own hero's journey. I will personally respond to each of those essays, point out any other parts of this class that I think might bolster your plan. Finally, I want to point out that this course is sponsored by the Platonic Mystery School of the Divine Infinite Being, and you can check those guys out at divineinfinitebeing.com.